Thugs harassed a homeless veteran on the street. Then Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped out of his car. The harsh city wind whipped discarded newspapers across the grimy sidewalk, carrying with it the distant wail of a siren and the acrid scent of exhaust fumes mixed with stale rain. Shadows stretched long and distorted under the flickering streetlights, painting the alleyways in shades of foreboding gray. A lone figure, bundled in layers of threadbare clothing, sat hunched against the cold brick wall of a dilapidated building, a tattered blanket pulled tight around his shoulders. His face, weathered and etched with the silent stories of 1,000 forgotten battles, was obscured by the brim of a faded baseball cap. The rhythmic clinking of loose change in a small dented tin cup was the only sound he made, a quiet plea lost in the urban din. The air was thick with the damp chill of late autumn, seeping into every crack and crevice, a cold that seemed to penetrate to the very bone. Suddenly, the relative quiet was shattered by the raucous laughter and aggressive shouts of a group of young men. 3 figures, clad in oversized hoodies and baggy pants, swaggered around the corner, their heavy boots scuffing against the pavement, the sound grating on the ears. "Look what we got here, boys." One of them, a lanky man with a sneering grin and a prominent tattoo snaking up his neck, drawled, his voice thick with menace, carrying an unpleasant edge. Another one of society's finest, begging for handouts. His companions chuckled, their eyes glinting with cruel amusement as they closed in on the veteran. The man on the ground flinched, pulling his blanket tighter, his gaze fixed on the worn-out sneakers before him, a silent plea for invisibility. A few passers-by quickened their pace, averting their eyes, pretending not to notice the brewing confrontation, their footsteps echoing their haste. "What's in the cup, old man?" the tattooed thug, who seemed to be the leader, demanded, kicking the tin cup with a careless flick of his foot. Coins scattered across the dirty pavement, rolling into the gutters and under-parked cars, their metallic clatter a harsh punctuation mark in the escalating tension. The veteran remained silent, his shoulders slumping further, a profound weariness settling over him, a burden too heavy to bear. "Cat got your tongue, Grandpa?" Another thug sneered, nudging the veteran's outstretched leg with his foot, a casual act of cruelty. "Maybe you should get a job, instead of living off honest people's hard work." A woman pushing a stroller hurried past, pulling her child closer, her face a mask of fear and disapproval, her eyes darting away. The air grew heavy with unspoken judgment from the few lingering onlookers, their silence a palpable weight, a collective shame. The leader, emboldened by the lack of resistance and the crowd's inaction, bent down, snatching the veteran's tattered blanket. "This looks like a nice souvenir," he jeered, holding it aloft, its frayed edges flapping in the wind, a symbol of comfort ripped away. The veteran shivered, his thin frame exposed to the biting cold, but still he offered no protest, no plea, only a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes, when they finally lifted, held a distant, almost vacant stare, as if he had seen far worse horrors than these petty bullies. A lifetime of pain etched into their depths. "Tell us where you're watching from in the comments," a young man whispered to his friend, pulling out his phone, a morbid curiosity overriding his sense of decency, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. The smell of stale beer and cheap cologne wafted from the thugs, a pungent contrast to the veteran's quiet dignity, the scent of desperation clinging to the air. "He's not even reacting," one of the thugs muttered, a flicker of disappointment in his voice, as if the lack of a struggle diminished their sport, robbing them of their perverse pleasure. What a waste of time. The leader, however, wasn't satisfied. He reached down, grabbing the veteran's worn backpack, its contents spilling onto the ground, a half-eaten sandwich, its bread stale and dry, a dog-eared paperback with a faded cover, and a small tarnished military medal, its ribbon frayed. "Oh, look at this," he scoffed, picking up the medal, turning it over in his fingers with a dismissive flick, as if it were worthless. A hero, huh? What a joke. The veteran's gaze finally sharpened, a flicker of something ancient and dangerous igniting in his eyes. A brief spark of defiance, but it was quickly extinguished, replaced by the same weary resignation, a battle he had fought too many times. The thugs laughed, their voices echoing off the brick walls, a symphony of cruelty that grated on the ears. They began to kick at the scattered belongings, grinding the sandwich into the pavement, tearing pages from the book, each act a deliberate desecration. The veteran watched, his jaw clenched, a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly in his cheek, a silent testament to his inner struggle. The crowd, a small cluster of silent witnesses, shifted uncomfortably, their faces a mix of pity and fear, none daring to intervene, their inaction a heavy burden. Before we reveal what the crowd didn't know, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends and catch more stories where the unexpected turns the tables, because some moments are too good to miss. Just as the leader raised his foot to stomp on the tarnished metal, a deep, resonant voice cut through the cold night air, a voice that carried an unmistakable authority, a familiar rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very pavement. "Hey, leave him alone!" The words were calm, measured, yet they carried an implicit threat that made the bugs freeze mid-action, their movements abruptly halted. All eyes, including the veterans, snapped towards the source. A sleek black SUV, previously unnoticed, had pulled silently to the curb just meters away, its engine a low hum. The driver's side door was now open, and a figure was stepping out. The street lights caught the glint of a powerful, broad shoulder, the unmistakable silhouette of a man whose presence alone commanded attention, a force of nature emerging from the shadows. The thugs exchanged nervous glances, their bravado faltering, a seed of doubt beginning to sprout in their aggressive posturing, their confident grins replaced by uncertainty. The veteran, for the first time, lifted his head fully, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he recognized the imposing figure, a flicker of something akin to hope in their depths. The man walked with a deliberate, unhurried pace, each step firm and purposeful, his shadow stretching long and dominant over the scene, casting the thugs in its intimidating embrace. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to the grimy street and the disheveled thugs, an island of sophistication in a sea of urban decay. As he moved into the faint glow of a nearby neon sign, his face became clear, chiseled and familiar, a face known the world over, instantly recognizable. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger. The crowd gasped, a collective murmur rippling through the small group of onlookers, a wave of shock and excitement. The thugs, their faces now pale, stared in disbelief, their mouths agape, their bravado completely shattered. The leader, who had been about to desecrate the metal, slowly lowered his foot, the metal still clutched in his trembling hand, a sudden weight of consequence. Arnold's gaze, steady and unwavering, swept over the scene, lingering for a moment on the scattered belongings and the shivering veteran, before settling on the leader, a silent challenge. "You think this is funny?" Arnold's voice, though still calm, had a steel edge to it now, a quiet power that made the air crackle, a palpable tension. The leader swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. "No, sir," he stammered, trying to hide the metal behind his back, a futile gesture. Arnold's eyes narrowed, catching the movement. "Give him back his medal." It wasn't a request, it was an order, delivered with an authority that brooked no argument. The thug, his hands shaking, slowly extended the tarnished medal towards the veteran, who took it with a hand that trembled slightly, clutching it to his chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Arnold then looked at the scattered coins and the torn book. "Pick it up!" Thugs, still stunned by the sudden appearance of the iconic figure, hesitated for a moment, then scrambled to obey. They fumbled awkwardly, gathering the coins, trying to piece together the torn pages of the book. Their movements, clumsy and desperate, a pathetic display. Arnold watched them, his expression unreadable, a silent judge observing their humiliation. "You think you're tough, harassing an old man?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet it resonated with immense power, cutting through the silence. "You think that makes you strong?" He stepped closer, his towering presence dwarfing the leader, who visibly recoiled, shrinking under his gaze. Strength isn't about bullying the vulnerable. It's about protecting them. It's about respect, and you clearly have none. The leader, his face a mask of fear, tried to mumble an apology, but the words caught in his throat, choked by terror. Arnold didn't wait for an answer. He gestured towards the veteran. "This man," he said, his voice rising slightly, gaining intensity, "fought for your freedom. He put his life on the line so you could stand here, acting like a fool. He deserves respect, not this kind of despicable treatment." He then turned his attention to the other two thugs, who were still nervously picking up the last of the veteran's belongings, their heads bowed in shame. "And you too," he stated, his gaze piercing. "You think you're friends with this coward? You stand by and let him do this?" The two thugs quickly shook their heads, their eyes wide, frantically distancing themselves from their leader, eager to escape Arnold's wrath. The confrontation reached its peak as Arnold fixed his gaze back on the leader, his eyes like steel. "You have two choices," he said, his voice now firm and unyielding, leaving no room for negotiation. "You can walk away now and never bother this man again, or you can find out what happens when you push someone who has had enough, someone who believes in justice." The leader, his eyes wide with terror, didn't need to be told twice. He nodded frantically, dropping the last of the veteran's belongings, and then, with a whimper, turned and fled, his two companions scrambling to follow him, their footsteps echoing their desperate retreat, disappearing back into the shadows from which they came, their bravado utterly crushed. The street was silent once more, save for the distant city hum, a profound quiet settling over the scene. Arnold watched them go, then turned his attention to the veteran. He knelt down, his expensive suit creasing, and gently helped the old man gather his remaining possessions, his large hands surprisingly tender. He picked up the tattered blanket, shaking off the dust, and handed it back. "Are you all right, my friend?" he asked, his voice softening, a genuine concern in his eyes, a warmth that cut through the cold. The veteran, tears welling in his eyes, nodded slowly, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, by the unexpected kindness. A small child, who had been watching from behind her mother's legs, cautiously approached, holding out a half-eaten candy bar to the veteran, a gesture of pure innocence. He took it, a small, grateful smile touching his lips, a rare moment of peace. Arnold stood up, his gaze sweeping over the now relieved crowd, a silent acknowledgement of their presence. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a thick wad of cash, and pressed it into the veteran's hand. "This is for you," he said simply, his voice quiet but firm. "And thank you for your service. You are a true hero." He gave the veteran a respectful nod, a gesture of profound gratitude, then turned and walked back to his SUV, his powerful frame disappearing into the night as silently as he had arrived, leaving behind a changed atmosphere. The crowd watched him go, a profound sense of awe and gratitude washing over them, a renewed belief in humanity. The veteran, clutching the money in his medal, looked up at the stars, a glimmer of hope returning to his weary eyes, a quiet dignity restored. Respect isn't taken by force. It's earned by actions that uplift and protect the vulnerable. Silent doesn't mean powerless, and sometimes the quietest person carries the greatest power. The power to inspire, to defend, and to remind us all of what truly matters.